Emily's quiet dream. Emily was always a woman of quiet dreams and gentle hopes. She never imagined herself the type to crave the extraordinary. A simple life filled with love, a family to come home to, and a partnership with her husband, James, was all she'd ever really wanted. At 24, she walked down the aisle, her hand clasped tightly in James's, feeling as if she were floating on a cloud of promises and possibilities. They both wanted a family. Both felt that they were ready to build a life together. But neither of them could have anticipated the road that lay ahead. Months drifted by in a soft haze of settling into marriage, of Saturday mornings wrapped in blankets, Sunday afternoons spent preparing meals for the week, and late-night talks about everything and nothing at all. They talked about their plans, their future children, and laughed over baby names. For Emily, every conversation was a brushstroke in the masterpiece of her dreams. She would always feel James's hand on her back, guiding her through the peaks and valleys of life. 1 year later, Emily had imagined by now she would be pregnant, maybe even have their first child nestled in their arms. But the months came and went with only shadows of hope fading into silence. Her friends and family offered well-meaning encouragement, each time promising her, "It'll happen soon," but those words felt increasingly hollow. She found herself staring out the window in the quiet hours, wondering if her dreams were slipping away without warning, like sand between her fingers. The second year crept up with a new sense of urgency. Emily's heart had begun to feel the weight of disappointment, pressing heavier with each passing month. Still, she was resilient, and so was James. Together, they sought advice, hoping that doctors or treatments could point them toward an answer, but each test and appointment seemed to return with the same echo of empty answers. As time stretched into the third year, Emily started to feel like a stranger to herself. She had once been a woman full of hope, her mind painting images of her little ones running through the living room, their laughter filling the halls. Now she moved through her days with a quiet ache in her chest, a feeling that she couldn't shake, no matter how she tried. One day, she was seated at her dining room table, her gaze fixed on an empty coffee mug, her thoughts swirling in familiar patterns of worry and sadness. James placed his hand on hers, a gentle squeeze that reminded her she wasn't alone. His presence was a balm to her heart, but even his unwavering support couldn't mend the sense of loss she felt for a future she could almost touch, yet couldn't seem to reach. "I think we should talk to someone else," James suggested gently, his eyes soft with compassion. He was a pillar of calm, always the grounding force between them. Emily nodded, her heart heavy but willing to try. They decided to see a specialist, one with a reputation for success, and set up an appointment for the following week. The drive to the clinic was quiet, punctuated by hopeful silence, as both of them were lost in thoughts of what this new step might bring. The doctor listened carefully, compassion etched on his face as he reviewed their journey so far. He offered them a plan, a set of steps that would take them on a new path, one that might lead them closer to their dream. Emily felt a flicker of hope reignite within her, and she gripped James's hand tightly, her eyes brimming with gratitude. With a renewed sense of purpose, they embarked on the regimen prescribed by the doctor. It wasn't an easy journey, and each step required patience and a level of commitment that tested their resilience. Together, they followed the doctor's instructions with unwavering determination, clinging to the belief that this might be the breakthrough they needed. Emily found herself at the pharmacy, picking up a round of medications that felt like promises in tiny, clear bottles. The pharmacist, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled at her, as if sensing the hope she was carrying. "Don't lose faith," she said softly, her words lingering in the air. Emily smiled, nodding, her heart swelling with gratitude for the unexpected kindness. Back home, she organized the pills and supplements, each one a small step in the journey she and James had committed to together. She clung to the rituals, feeling the new rhythm in her life, one that revolved around hope and patience. And James was there beside her, his calm presence a constant reminder of their shared strength. Each night, as they followed their new routine, Emily found herself leaning on James more than ever before. They spoke of their future with a gentleness, their conversations filled with a quiet reverence for the life they were building together, even if it was marked by challenges. Every disappointment was a moment to comfort each other, to find strength in the love that had brought them together in the first place. One evening, after a long day, Emily sat alone in their dimly lit living room, the shadows playing softly across the walls. She felt the familiar weight of longing in her chest, the ache that had become an uninvited companion over the years. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to let go of the sorrow that clung to her. At that moment, she felt James's arms wrap around her, his warmth seeping into her tired body. "We're in this together," he murmured, his voice a soothing balm. His words reminded her that she wasn't alone, that they were both committed to this journey, no matter how long it took. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Emily held on to the quiet faith that had carried her through the darkest moments. She knew their journey was far from over, but with James by her side, she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they might find the family they had dreamed of for so long. The struggle beneath the surface. Emily woke up the next morning with a slight ache in her heart, but an even stronger resolve. She looked at James, still asleep beside her, his face soft in the early morning light, and she felt the familiar tug of love mixed with sadness. Each day, she reminded herself to keep going, to hold on to the hope that this journey would eventually lead them somewhere beautiful. But some mornings, like today, the weight felt particularly heavy. They continued following the doctor's regimen, counting days and marking cycles on the calendar, as if each marked date held a promise. The structure provided a strange kind of comfort, but it also felt like a trap, a loop of endless waiting that frayed her patience and tested her endurance. The world around her seemed to move effortlessly, while she felt as if she were trapped in place, watching others live out the dream she so desperately longed for. The worst part was the silence that stretched between her and her friends, who had begun to drift away, perhaps unable to understand the depth of her sadness. Some of them had started families of their own, and while she was happy for them, every announcement, every baby shower, felt like a quiet reminder of what she was missing. One afternoon, as she scrolled through social media, her heart sank when she saw another friend had posted about their new baby. The joyful comments and congratulations filled the screen, but to Emily, it felt like a distant echo, something that only reminded her of her own emptiness. She closed her laptop, pressing her hands to her face as if she could block out the ache. How could happiness for others coexist with this deep, all-consuming sadness? James noticed her struggles, but he too was carrying his own burden. He didn't often speak of it, perhaps trying to shield her from his own pain. But she could see it in his eyes, in the way he lingered by the door each time he left for work, as if afraid to leave her alone with her thoughts. They were both navigating this uncharted territory, each holding on to their own pain while trying to support the other. One evening, Emily decided she couldn't keep bottling up her feelings. She turned to James, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you ever wonder if maybe this isn't meant to happen for us?" James looked at her, his expression softening as he took her hand. "I think about it," he admitted, his gaze distant for a moment. "But I also think about all the things we've overcome. We're stronger together, Em. And I believe that somehow, some way, we'll find a way forward." His words were a balm to her heart, soothing the rough edges of her doubts. She nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder, grateful for his unshakable faith in them. In moments like these, she realized just how much she relied on him, how much his strength bolstered her own. They sat in silence, their hands intertwined, finding solace in each other's presence. As the weeks turned into months, their routine became both a comfort and a burden. Emily found herself doing everything she could to give them the best chance, eating the right foods, exercising, meditating. Every effort felt like a small sacrifice, an offering toward the life she dreamed of. She even tried yoga, hoping that the practice might help her find some peace amid the turmoil. At first, it felt foreign, her body stiff and unyielding. But with time, She found herself looking forward to the quiet moments on the mat, the deep breaths that anchored her. Then came another doctor's visit, one that filled her with a cautious optimism. They'd been through several treatments by this point, each one a glimmer of hope that had ultimately led nowhere. But this time, the doctor proposed a different path, one that was both exciting and daunting. He explained the potential success rate, the risks, and the commitment it would require from both of them. It was a path that held promise but also came with no guarantees. They left the clinic that day, their minds swirling with possibilities. In the car, James broke the silence. "It's a big decision, isn't it?" Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the passing trees. "Yes, it is. But I think I'm ready to try. I don't want to look back and wonder, what if? I want to know we did everything we could." James reached over, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll do it, Em. We'll take this step together, just like we always have." The decision marked a turning point for them, a moment that solidified their commitment to the journey they had embarked on years ago. They returned home with a sense of purpose, preparing for what lay ahead with renewed determination. Emily threw herself into the preparations, organizing appointments, setting reminders, and reading everything she could find on their new treatment plan. Days turned into weeks, and the process took its toll on both of them. The side effects were challenging, both physically and emotionally. There were days when Emily barely recognized herself in the mirror, her face drawn and pale, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion that had seeped into her bones. But every time she looked at James, she saw the same fierce determination in his eyes, the same unwavering support, and it gave her the strength to keep going. One evening, as they sat together after another exhausting day, James wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You're amazing, you know that," he whispered, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Emily smiled weakly, leaning into his warmth. "I don't feel amazing. I feel worn out, like I'm fighting a battle I can't win." "But you're still fighting," he replied, his tone gentle yet firm. "And that makes you stronger than you realize." His words touched her deeply, filling her with a sense of pride she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that this journey wasn't just about creating a family. It was about resilience, about finding strength in places she never thought to look. And as long as she had James by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. On a particularly difficult day, Emily found herself sitting alone in the quiet of their bedroom, feeling the weight of the journey settle on her shoulders. She closed her eyes, letting the silence envelop her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of peace. It wasn't the peace of having all the answers or the assurance that everything would work out. It was the peace of acceptance, of knowing that she had given everything she had, regardless of the outcome. When James joined her later, he found her with a calm smile on her face, her eyes soft with a newfound clarity. She looked at him, feeling the surge of gratitude for the man who had stood by her through every trial, every tear, every moment of doubt. "We'll be okay, James," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "No matter what happens, we'll be okay." He pulled her into his arms, his embrace a silent promise. Together, they would face whatever came next, side by side, their love a beacon in the darkness, a glimmer of light. Months had passed since Emily and James committed to the new treatment plan. The journey had become a rhythm of appointments, medications, and carefully measured hope. While the initial excitement had faded, it was replaced with a steadiness, a quiet perseverance that bound them even closer. They knew each day, each step was a small victory, and with each milestone, they dared to dream just a little more. But this was not without its challenges. Emily's physical and emotional resilience were tested more than she ever imagined. There were days when she felt drained, her body aching under the strain, her heart heavy with the fears that whispered to her in the dark hours of the night. It was during these moments that she relied on James more than ever. He became her anchor, his presence a constant source of comfort. And even as the treatment weighed on her, She found herself discovering new depths of strength within her, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. One particularly cold evening, Emily found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the heater, the only sound in their dimly lit bedroom. Her mind raced with questions, fears, and hopes, all tangled into a restless loop that wouldn't let her sleep. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake James, and wandered into the living room, wrapping herself in a warm blanket. She settled onto the couch, her gaze drawn to the framed photos on the wall, images of their early days together, bright-eyed and brimming with dreams. Her fingers traced the edge of a photograph, her heart tightening at the sight of their younger selves, so hopeful and unburdened. She longed for the simplicity of those days, for the ease of a life not yet touched by this journey's weight. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice James enter the room until he sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He didn't say anything, simply held her, his presence like a warm, steady pulse that reminded her she wasn't alone. They sat in comfortable silence, and eventually she found the courage to voice the fears that had been gnawing at her heart. What if we're wrong, James? What if all of this is for nothing? James tightened his hold on her, his voice gentle yet firm. Then we'll face it together. We'll rebuild, no matter what. But we can't give up, Em. Not when we've come this far. His words settled over her like a soothing balm, calming the storm within her. She leaned into him, closing her eyes, allowing herself to rest in his strength. For a moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, their journey would lead to the life they had dreamed of. The following week, Emily received a call that would change everything. It was late afternoon, and she was alone, tidying up the house, trying to distract herself from the endless wait for news. When her phone rang, she recognized the number instantly, the clinic. Her heart pounded as she answered, her hand trembling as she pressed the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but there was a warmth in the doctor's tone that told her this wasn't just another update. "Emily," he began, "I have some good news for you. The results are in, and it's positive. You're pregnant." Time seemed to freeze as the words sank in. She stood there, rooted to the spot, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what she was hearing. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, a soft, wondrous sound that felt both foreign and familiar. It was the word she had longed to hear, the hope she had nurtured in the quiet moments when doubt threatened to consume her. Tears filled her eyes, and a smile broke across her face, a smile so wide it hurt. She thanked the doctor, her voice choked with emotion, and ended the call. She sat down, her hands pressed to her stomach, as if trying to feel the new life growing within her. The disbelief slowly gave way to joy, and she laughed through her tears, the sound filling the empty house. When James came home that evening, Emily could barely contain herself. She waited by the door, her heart pounding with anticipation. As soon as he stepped inside, she threw herself into his arms, her laughter bubbling up uncontrollably. "What's going on?" he asked, laughing as he hugged her tightly, his confusion giving way to a smile. She pulled back, her eyes shining with tears. "James, we did it. I'm pregnant." For a moment, he just stared at her, as if trying to comprehend the words she had just spoken. And then his face broke into a look of pure joy, his eyes filling with tears as he pulled her into his arms again. They held each other, laughing and crying, their joy too immense for words. The days that followed were a whirlwind of excitement and cautious optimism. Emily found herself marveling at the simplest things, the everyday moments that now felt imbued with a new kind of magic. The gentle warmth of sunlight streaming through the windows, the soft rustling of leaves outside, the sound of James's laughter. All of it felt like a gift, a reminder of the miracle that had taken root within her. As her pregnancy progressed, Emily and James fell into a new rhythm, one marked by a quiet joy that permeated every aspect of their lives. They prepared the nursery, choosing soft colors and delicate fabrics, their hearts full of anticipation for the day they would bring their child home. Each night, they would sit together, talking to the baby, their voices soft with love and wonder. They shared their hopes, their dreams, their promises for the life they would create together. But even amid the joy, there were moments of fear. Emily worried about the health of her baby, about the journey that still lay ahead. She knew that their struggle had not ended with the positive test. There were still hurdles to overcome, uncertainties to face. Yet with James by her side, she felt a strength she hadn't known before. They had weathered so much together, and she knew they would face whatever challenges came their way. As she neared the end of her pregnancy, Emily found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. She thought of the years of waiting, the moments of despair, the quiet nights spent searching for hope. And now, here she was, standing on the threshold of a new life, a life filled with the love and joy she had always dreamed of. One evening, as they sat together in the nursery, Emily placed James's hand on her belly, letting him feel the soft, rhythmic movement of their baby. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it, James," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "After everything, we're here." He smiled, his gaze filled with love and pride. "We did, Em. And no matter what happens, we'll always have this. We'll always have each other." They sat there in the quiet, the room bathed in the soft glow of the evening light, their hearts full of hope and gratitude. They knew that their journey was far from over, but in that moment, they had everything they needed. Together, they had found a way through the darkness, a way to the life they had always dreamed of. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side, their love a constant light guiding them forward. New beginnings and silent fears. As Emily's pregnancy moved into the final trimester, anticipation filled their days like the scent of freshly baked bread, warm, comforting, ever-present. Each day felt like an offering of promise, a countdown to the moment they would finally meet the life they had dreamed into being. Emily's excitement was uncontainable, spilling over in little smiles and tears, in moments when she'd run her hands over her belly, feeling the soft nudges and kicks of the baby growing inside her. But beneath the surface of their joy, a quiet fear lurked, a shadow neither she nor James could fully shake. They had journeyed through so much, faced the edge of despair more times than they cared to remember. And now, standing on the brink of parenthood, they couldn't help but worry that something could still go wrong. They spoke of these fears only in whispers, late at night, when the house was silent, and it was just the two of them, bound together by the courage they'd built over the years. One rainy afternoon, Emily found herself sorting through baby clothes they had purchased, her fingers brushing over the tiny fabrics, each one carefully chosen with dreams of the future. She picked up a little blue onesie and held it to her chest, closing her eyes as she envisioned the day she'd dress her baby in it, the day she'd feel their soft skin, hear their tiny breaths. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice James enter the room until he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She looked up, surprised, and saw the concern in his eyes. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly, his voice a balm to the lingering anxiety she couldn't quite shake. She nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. "It's just, I keep thinking, what if something goes wrong? We've come so far, but it feels fragile, like it could slip away in an instant." James knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I feel it too, Em, but we can't let those fears take over. We're here now, and we've made it through so much together. This little one," he said, his hand moving to her belly, "is already a miracle. Whatever happens, we'll face it as we always have, together." His words settled around her like a shield, and she drew strength from his steadiness. She took a deep breath, nodding as she leaned into his embrace, letting the warmth of his love chase away her fears. In the days that followed, Emily found herself growing bolder in her dreams, allowing herself to fully embrace the joy of what lay ahead. She and James spent hours preparing the nursery, placing tiny stuffed animals on the shelves, organizing blankets and toys, and laughing over how neither of them could figure out the assembly instructions for the crib. They were both nervous, of course, but that nervousness was tempered by excitement, by a sense of wonder at the life they were about to welcome. Then one evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Emily felt a sharp, unfamiliar pain. She brushed it off at first, thinking it was just a normal part of late pregnancy, but as the minutes passed, the pain grew sharper, spreading through her body like a wave. Her heart began to race, and she clutched her belly, fear gripping her. "James," she gasped, her voice tinged with panic. He was by her side in an instant, his face etched with worry. "Em, what is it? Are you okay?" She shook her head, trying to catch her breath as another wave of pain washed over her. "I don't know. It doesn't feel right." Without wasting a second, James helped her to the car, his hand steady even as she could see the fear in his eyes. They drove to the hospital in silence, both of them gripped by a quiet, overwhelming terror. Emily's mind raced with fears she couldn't put into words, and she reached for James's hand, holding it tightly as if it were a lifeline. At the hospital, the doctors and nurses moved quickly, their calm efficiency a stark contrast to the storm raging in Emily's mind. She lay on the bed, gripping James's hand as the medical staff worked around her, their voices low and soothing. The minutes felt like hours, each one stretching with the weight of her fears. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor approached them, his face kind but serious. "Emily, you're experiencing some early contractions. It's a bit earlier than we'd like, but we're monitoring the baby closely, and everything looks stable for now. We're going to keep you here for observation, just to make sure both of you are safe." Relief washed over her, but it was mixed with worry. She looked at James, searching his face for reassurance, and he gave her a small, comforting smile, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. That night, James stayed by her side, refusing to leave, even when the nurses offered to bring him a chair. He sat on the edge of her bed, his hand resting on her belly as he whispered to the baby, his voice low and soothing. Emily watched him, her heart swelling with gratitude for the man who had walked every step of this journey with her, the man who had been her strength when she had none left. In the early hours of the morning, Emily finally drifted into a light sleep, lulled by the gentle rise and fall of James's voice, the warmth of his hand a steady reminder that she wasn't alone. The following day, after a series of tests and observations, the doctors informed them that the baby was safe and Emily's early contractions had subsided. She would need to rest and avoid any strenuous activity for the remainder of her pregnancy, but with careful monitoring, there was every reason to believe they would make it to full term. Relieved but exhausted, they'd returned home, each step a reminder of the fragility of the journey they were on. Emily spent the next few weeks resting as much as she could, while James took on every task, ensuring she had everything she needed. He became her constant caregiver, bringing her meals, setting up a cozy spot by the window where she could watch the world outside, and reading to her in the evenings, his voice a soothing balm to her weary soul. As the due date approached, Emily felt a quiet confidence settle over her. She knew now, more than ever, that she and James were ready for whatever lay ahead. They had faced the darkest moments together, and she knew that, come what may, their love would guide them through. Then, one crisp autumn morning, Emily felt the first real contraction, a deep, powerful surge that left her breathless. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her, that this was it. The time had come. James helped her to the car, his movements calm and steady even as she could see the excitement in his eyes. They arrived at the hospital just as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the city. The world felt alive with possibility, every sound, every breath tinged with anticipation. Hours passed in a blur of pain and joy, each contraction bringing her closer to the moment she had waited for her entire life. James was by her side through it all, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement, his love a constant presence that filled her with strength. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the cries of their baby filled the room, a sound so pure and beautiful that it brought tears to their eyes. The doctor placed the tiny, perfect bundle in Emily's arms, and as she looked down at her child, all the years of waiting, all the heartache and fear melted away. This was it, the moment she had dreamed of, the moment she had fought for with every ounce of strength she possessed. She looked at James, their eyes meeting over the miracle they had created together. And in that moment, she knew that every struggle, every tear, had been worth it. Their journey was only beginning, and as she held their child close, Emily felt a deep, abiding peace settle over her. She had found her way through the darkness, guided by the love that had carried her, and now, in the quiet of that hospital room, she knew that her heart was finally, completely full. The quiet miracle of family. The days that followed the birth of their child were unlike anything Emily had ever known. Time itself seemed to slow, as if each moment wanted to stretch into eternity. She found herself lost in the smallest details, watching the way her baby's tiny fingers curled and uncurled, the soft rise and fall of their chest, and the warmth of their skin against hers. It was a peace she hadn't realized she'd been searching for, a quiet miracle that filled her heart in ways words could never capture. James, too, was transformed. Emily watched him as he cradled their newborn, his face softened with an awe she had rarely seen. He was a natural, his movements gentle and sure, as though he had always been meant to be a father. In the middle of the night, when their baby cried, James would rise without complaint, rocking them back to sleep with a patience that seemed endless. Emily would watch him from the bed, her heart swelling with a love that felt boundless. They named their baby Lily, a name that felt like sunshine and resilience, a name that represented everything they had overcome. Lily was their dream made real, the embodiment of the hope and perseverance that had carried them through their darkest days. Her name became a song in their home, a word spoken with reverence, joy, and quiet disbelief. In those early days, Emily often found herself caught in the tender moments that marked their new lives as parents. She would sit in the nursery, rocking Lily to sleep as the soft glow of the nightlight bathed the room in a warm light. Outside the window, the world carried on, indifferent to the miracle unfolding within their walls. But Emily felt as if their small family was wrapped in a protective cocoon, safe and untouched by the troubles that once weighed so heavily on her heart. But as much as she treasured these moments, the challenges of parenthood began to emerge, small cracks that reminded her of the delicate balance they were striving to maintain. Sleepless nights left her feeling foggy, her once steady hands now trembling with the exhaustion that accompanied each late-night feeding. She struggled with self-doubt, questioning every choice, every decision, wondering if she was truly prepared for this monumental responsibility. One evening, as she sat feeding Lily in the stillness of the night, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of inadequacy settle over her. The silence magnified her fears, and she found herself staring at her reflection in the window, barely recognizing the tired woman looking back. Her heart ached with a familiar worry, the kind that had lingered through the years of waiting. Had they truly made it? Was she enough? Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice James enter the room until he gently placed his hands on her shoulders, his touch warm and grounding. "Emily," he whispered, his voice filled with understanding. "You're doing an incredible job. You're everything Lily needs and more." His words brought a lump to her throat, and she turned to face him, her eyes brimming with unused tears. I don't know if I'm good enough, James. She deserves so much, and I'm so afraid of failing her." He knelt beside her, his gaze steady and unwavering. We both went through so much to get here. You have more strength than anyone I know. Lily is lucky to have you as her mother. I'm lucky to have you by my side." His reassurance anchored her, and she leaned into him, feeling the weight of her worries ease just a little. They sat there in silence, their love and shared journey a silent promise that they would face this together, as they always had. James's unwavering support reminded her that she wasn't alone, that they were partners in this new life they were building. In the weeks that followed, Emily found herself slowly adjusting to the rhythm of motherhood. She learned to trust her instincts, to let go of the need for perfection, and to embrace the beautiful, messy reality of parenthood. She cherished the quiet moments with Lily, her heart swelling with love each time she held her daughter close, and she found joy in the everyday routines, singing lullabies, reading bedtime stories, and watching as Lily's eyes followed her every movement with an innocent wonder that filled her soul. One crisp autumn morning, Emily decided to take Lily for a walk in the nearby park, feeling the need to reconnect with the world outside their cozy home. She bundled her daughter in a soft, knitted blanket and placed her gently in the stroller, watching as Lily's tiny face peered out with wide, curious eyes. The world was a tapestry of colors, leaves in shades of gold and crimson swirling in the breeze, and the air was tinged with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. As they strolled through the park, Emily was struck by the beauty of the moment, by the simple joy of sharing this experience with her daughter. She felt as though she were seeing the world anew, through Lily's innocent eyes. They stopped by a small pond, watching the ducks glide across the water, and Emily found herself overcome with gratitude for this life she had once feared she'd never know. Lost in thought, she didn't notice an older woman sitting on a nearby bench until the woman spoke, her voice gentle and kind. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Emily turned, offering a warm smile. "Yes, it really is." The woman glanced at Lily, her face softening. "She's a precious little one. You're very lucky." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "We are. She's our little miracle." The woman smiled knowingly, her gaze thoughtful. Sometimes the greatest blessings come after the hardest battles, but that just makes them all the more precious, doesn't it? Her words resonated deeply with Emily, a reminder of the journey that had brought her here. She nodded, feeling a quiet peace settle over her. "Yes, it really does." They continued their walk, Emily's heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She felt a sense of clarity, an understanding that, despite the challenges, she had everything she needed within her. The doubts, the fears, they were part of the journey, but they didn't define her. What mattered was the love she had for her family, the strength that had carried her through the darkest days, and the quiet resilience that would guide her forward. As the months passed, Emily and James settled into their roles as parents, each day bringing new moments of joy, wonder, and growth. They celebrated every milestone, every small achievement with a gratitude that only those who had known struggle could truly understand. Lily grew, her laughter filling their home, her innocent joy a daily reminder of the miracle they had been given. One night, as they put Lily to bed, Emily and James sat together, watching their daughter sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. Emily looked at James, her heart full, and whispered, "We're so lucky, aren't we?" James nodded, his gaze soft. "We really are, and no matter what, we'll always have this." They sat in silence, their hearts brimming with love and gratitude, the quiet miracle of their family a testament to the strength they had found in each other. They knew there would be challenges ahead, days when doubts would creep back, when parenthood would test them in ways they couldn't foresee. But they also knew they would face it all together, their love a steady light guiding them through whatever life had in store. In the quiet of their home, surrounded by the warmth of family, Emily felt a peace she had never known, a peace that came from the knowledge that she had finally found her way home. Embracing tomorrow. The years passed gently, each one marked by quiet milestones and moments that seemed to carry the weight of eternity. Lily grew, her small footsteps echoing through their home, her laughter weaving through their days like a melody. For Emily and James, every day was a new chapter, a testament to the love and resilience that had carried them through. Lily was a curious child, her eyes wide with wonder at the world around her. Emily often found herself marveling at her daughter's insatiable curiosity. She would watch as Lily chased butterflies in the garden, her tiny hands reaching out in delight, or as she sat in the kitchen with a crayon, carefully drawing her version of the family. A tangle of circles and lines that Emily found more precious than any masterpiece. One sunny afternoon, Emily and James took Lily to the beach. It was her first time seeing the ocean, and the look of awe on her face as she gazed at the vast expanse of water made Emily's heart swell with love. She knelt down beside her daughter, holding her small hand as the waves washed over their feet. "Look, Mama," Lily squealed, pointing to the seagulls that danced above them. "Yes, sweetie. Aren't they beautiful?" Emily replied, her voice soft with wonder. She looked over at James, who was watching them with a gentle smile, his eyes filled with pride. They spent the day building sandcastles, collecting seashells, and splashing in the shallow waves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, Emily felt a sense of completeness she had never known. It was as if every moment of struggle, every tear shed in the years before, had led them to this perfect, fleeting day. But as they settled back into their daily lives, Emily couldn't shake a sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. She knew that happiness was fragile, that life could change in an instant. She had seen it happen before, when their dreams had been threatened, and the fear of losing what they had now sometimes haunted her. She found herself checking on Lily in the middle of the night, watching her chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath, whispering quiet prayers of gratitude and protection. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily sat beside James in the living room, the weight of her unspoken fears pressing down on her. She glanced at him, unsure of how to begin, but he sensed her tension and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Em, what's on your mind?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I guess I'm just scared. I know we've been through so much, and I should feel grateful every day. But sometimes I can't help but think about how easily it could all disappear. I don't want to lose any of this, James." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. I feel it too, sometimes. But I think what we went through taught us how precious these moments are. Maybe that fear is just a reminder to cherish every second, to love each other fully and deeply, knowing that nothing is guaranteed." His words resonated with her, filling her with a quiet peace. She realized that it was natural to fear the loss of what they held so dear, but that fear didn't have to control her. Instead, she could use it as a reminder to live each day with gratitude, to embrace every moment with an open heart. As they navigated the joys and challenges of parenthood, Emily found herself embracing a new kind of strength, one that allowed her to hold both love and fear in her heart without letting either overshadow the other. She learned to cherish the quiet mornings when Lily would crawl into their bed, her small body nestled between them, her laughter filling the room with light. She learned to savor the simple moments, family dinners, bedtime stories, the feeling of James's hand in hers as they walked through the park. When Lily started school, Emily found herself facing another transition. She watched as her little girl marched confidently into the classroom on the first day, her backpack nearly as big as she was, her smile bright and fearless. Emily felt a pang of bittersweet pride, knowing that her baby was growing, slowly stepping into a world beyond their cozy, safe bubble. As the days turned into months, Lily blossomed. She made friends, brought home stories of her adventures, and filled their home with the vibrant energy of childhood. Emily often sat by her daughter's bedside at night, listening to her recount her day, her voice full of excitement as she talked about her friends, her teachers, and the things she was learning. One evening, as they sat together in Lily's room, Emily noticed her daughter looking at her with a serious expression, her brows furrowed in concentration. "Mama," Lily began, her voice soft, "can you tell me the story of when I was born?" Emily smiled, her heart swelling with love. She had told the story before, in pieces, but Lily's curiosity never faded. She settled beside her daughter, pulling her close, and began to speak. "You see, Lily," she said, her voice gentle. "Before you were born, your daddy and I dreamed of having a little girl just like you. We waited and hoped for a long time, and it wasn't always easy. But we believed, even when it seemed impossible. And when you finally came into our lives, it was like a dream come true." Lily listened intently, her small fingers tracing patterns on the blanket. "So you and Daddy waited a really long time." Emily nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, we did. And every moment of waiting was worth it, because it brought us to you." Lily's face broke into a radiant smile, and she wrapped her arms around her mother's neck, squeezing tightly. "I love you, Mama." Emily held her daughter close, her heart filled with a love so deep it brought tears to her eyes. In that moment, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would be okay. They had each other, and that was enough. As she tucked Lily into bed and kissed her goodnight, Emily felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She walked downstairs to find James waiting for her, a warm smile on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her as she melted into his embrace. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet joy. "Everything is perfect." They stood together in the soft glow of their home, their hearts full, their lives intertwined in a bond that had been tested and strengthened by every challenge they had faced. They knew that the road ahead would bring new moments of joy and struggle, new milestones and farewells, but they were ready. Together, they had built a life of love, resilience, and gratitude, a life that held space for both dreams and fears, for both the beauty and the fragility of family. As they gazed out into the night, Emily felt a gentle breeze drift through the open window, carrying with it a sense of calm and a promise of tomorrow. She closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet serenity, and knew with certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, their hearts bound by the love they had created and nurtured. Their story was one of hope, of dreams fulfilled and challenges overcome, a story that would continue to unfold in the small, beautiful moments they shared. And as Emily held James's hand, she knew that this was the life she had always dreamed of, a life that was, at last, perfectly, beautifully complete. A legacy of love. Years drifted by, each one stitching new memories into the fabric of their lives. Lily grew taller and more independent, her world expanding beyond the walls of their home. She was becoming her own person, curious, compassionate, and filled with a zest for life that Emily and James loved to nurture. Their small family was built on shared stories and dreams, quiet traditions that marked their days with meaning. With Lily in middle school, Emily found herself with more time for self-reflection. She often returned to the memories of her journey to motherhood, those years of waiting and hoping that had shaped her in ways she couldn't have imagined. She looked at her daughter, now on the cusp of adolescence, with a mixture of pride and wonder, marveling at the person Lily was becoming. She was bright and thoughtful, always seeking ways to help others, and Emily knew that their journey had taught Lily something about resilience, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, Lily entered the kitchen, her face thoughtful. "Mom," she began, her tone serious, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Lily hesitated, her gaze fixed on the countertop. "I know you and Dad really wanted me and waited a long time before I came along. But do you think I was worth all the waiting?" Emily's heart softened, and she set down the knife, turning to face her daughter. She placed her hands on Lily's shoulders, looking into her eyes with a tenderness that conveyed 1,000 unspoken words. "Lily, you were worth every single moment of waiting. Every tear, every doubt, every night spent hoping. It all led us to you. And I would go through it all again, without a second thought, if it meant having you in our lives." Lily's eyes glistened, and she wrapped her arms around her mother, holding on tightly. "I love you, Mom." Emily held her close, feeling the weight of their shared journey in that embrace. She knew that Lily's question had come from a place of curiosity, of wanting to understand her place in the world. And in that moment, Emily realized just how much she had been given, how all the struggles and hardages had brought her to this incredible gift of being a mother. As the years continued to pass, Lily flourished. She threw herself into school, discovering passions that Emily and James nurtured wholeheartedly. She took up art, her bedroom walls gradually filling with sketches and paintings that captured her view of the world, a world brimming with color and life, shaped by a heart that saw beauty in the simplest things. But Emily and James knew that one day, Lily would step into the world on her own. The thought of her leaving home was bittersweet, a reminder that their lives were forever evolving. They watched her grow with a mixture of pride and nostalgia, feeling both the excitement and the ache of knowing that their little girl was no longer so little. When the day came for Lily to go off to college, Emily felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. She was proud, of course, thrilled to see her daughter stepping into her future with the same determination and grace that had defined her upbringing. But there was also a quiet sadness, a sense of letting go that filled her with memories of every milestone they had shared. On the morning of Lily's departure, Emily and James helped her pack the last of her belongings, each item a reminder of the life they had built together. Emily ran her hand over a framed photo on Lily's desk, a picture of the three of them on a family vacation, their faces alight with joy. She felt a pang of nostalgia, but also a deep gratitude for the years they had shared. As they stood by the car, ready to say their goodbyes, Lily turned to her parents, her face a mixture of excitement and nerves. "I'll miss you guys," she whispered, her voice catching. Emily pulled her into a tight hug, her eyes misting with tears. "We'll miss you too, sweetheart. But this is your time. Go out there and make the world better, just by being you." James hugged her next, his voice steady even as his eyes shone with emotion. "You're going to do amazing things, Lily. We're so proud of you." They watched as she drove away, her figure growing smaller in the distance, until she was finally out of sight. Emily stood by James's side, a quiet sense of loss filling the space where their daughter's presence had always been. But she also felt a profound peace, a sense that they had done their job well, that they had given Lily the love and strength she needed to face the world on her own. The house felt different without Lily's laughter echoing through the halls, and Emily and James found themselves adjusting to the rhythm of a quieter life. They spent their days rediscovering each other, exploring hobbies they had set aside during the busy years of parenthood. Emily returned to her love of painting, filling their home with canvases of vibrant landscapes, while James took up woodworking, crafting pieces that held a rustic charm. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of amber and rose, Emily turned to James, a gentle smile on her face. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, her voice filled with quiet reflection. James nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Yes, we have. And I wouldn't change a thing. Every moment, every challenge, it was all worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, each of them lost in memories of their shared journey. They had been through so much together, faced fears and dreams that had both shaken and strengthened them. And now, as they sat side by side, Emily knew that their love had become something unbreakable, a legacy of resilience that would live on in their family. As the years turned to decades, Emily and James continued to live a life filled with purpose, their love a quiet force that guided them through the changing seasons of their lives. They visited Lily often, watching with pride as she built a life of her own, creating her own family, and passing on the values that had shaped her upbringing. One crisp autumn afternoon, many years later, Emily sat with her granddaughter on her lap, a little girl with the same curious spark in her eyes that Lily had once had. They sat together on the porch, watching the leaves drift down in golden spirals, the air filled with the scent of earth and promise. "Grandma," the little girl asked, looking up at Emily with wide eyes, "will you tell me a story?" Emily smiled, her heart brimming with love. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me tell you a story about hope, about dreams, and about how sometimes the greatest blessings come after the hardest battles." As she spoke, her voice steady and warm. She felt a deep sense of peace. She was surrounded by the legacy of her life, a family built on love, resilience, and the quiet courage that had carried her through the darkest moments. She knew that her story would live on, passed down through the generations, a reminder that love could overcome even the greatest challenges. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the world, Emily felt a quiet contentment settle over her. She had found her way through the storms, through the moments of doubt and fear. And now, in the twilight of her life, she knew that her journey had been worth every step. She closed her eyes, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the warmth of her granddaughter's small hand in hers. The world was at peace, and so was she, her heart full with the knowledge that her legacy of love would live on, a beacon of hope for those who would walk this path after her.